The Comic Binge presents a sub-series dedicated to one of the most divisive and imaginative mainstream comic book runs ever created with an iconic character. This is Knights Never Die, Grant Morrison's Batman, issue by issue. Tonight we begin part one of our journey, Knight versus Glove. And the issue that we're going to be breaking down, the one that started it all, Batman number 655. Well, never let it be said that I'm not a little clunky out of the gate. Hi, I'm Chris Clow, Comic Binge co-host, and I'm thrilled to be here to begin this journey into one of the most unique mainstream superhero runs on the ongoing titles ever committed to the comic book page. Tonight, I'm joined by my partner in crime fighting, from The Flash up to speed with Wally West, and of course, Batman on film, the occasional guest on Discovery Debrief, a Star Trek podcast as well, Mr. Javi Trujillo. Javi, how you doing?
I am well. Happy to be here. Really excited to talk Batman with one of my favorite people to talk Batman with.
Oh, well, you're too kind. Yeah, we got a lot to talk about, of course. And we've been planning this for a while, and it took me a while to sort of get off of my ass and actually put this thing into practice. But this is a monumental undertaking, I think. This is the very beginning.
It's a daunting task.
Yeah.
I mean, we're talking, 6 years of comics across 3 different titles minimum. And really dense, lots of illusions, lots of foreshadowing, lots of every literary term that you can think of. Hey, Andrew. So it's something I've read a lot in my fandom, and I don't even know if I fully grasp the complexities all the way yet.
Sure.
So I'm hoping that with this series, between you and I and the deep dive that we're doing, that we bring some more illumination, maybe win over some fans, maybe convince Ryan Lauer that he doesn't have to be nervous about this storyline.
Well, hey, we'll see what we can do. Let's not expect miracles, but we'll certainly
That's fair.
give things a try, I think. Well, so again, yeah, this is the very beginning of our journey with Knights Never Die, and I just wanted to make a couple of quick little housekeeping notes first.
Yeah.
So this run is so large that it is actually contained in 3 full hardcover omnibus volumes. And the reason that I bring the omnibuy up is because these are actually going to be providing most of the mapping for what we're going to be doing over the course of talking about this entire run. The only thing that isn't included in the Grant Morrison Omnibus Volume 1 is all the stuff having to do with Final Crisis. We will deal with Final Crisis once we get there. Don't misunderstand me. I love that story, but determining exactly what we're going to be taking from it, obviously the core miniseries is part of it. But 2 tie-in issues of Batman, which are contained in here. But there are a couple of other additional tie-ins from Final Crisis that Morrison wrote that I think will be relevant to understanding the full context of the crossover event as a whole. So yeah, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But if you have Batman by Grant Morrison Omnibus Volume 1, you are well equipped to begin this journey with us. And even if you don't have this, I am going to be crafting a full reading list that I will share to Comic Binge followers via DC Universe Infinite. All of the issues that we're going to be talking about are available on there, unlike a couple of the other events that we have delved into that are DC related. But yeah, I think that's pretty much most of the major housekeeping, just in terms of the mapping that we're going to be exploring here. So we're actually, before we dive into Batman 655 itself, there is another book that we have to sort of touch on first, and that is 52 week 47. So, Javi, you haven't really joined us for our 52 binge that we've been doing. We did touch on number 30, which was the first
Mhm.
appearance of Bruce Wayne when he encountered the ten-eyed the ten-eyed brothers who killed his demons, but apparently left him defenseless. Before we actually get into the Bruce Wayne stuff, what do you make of 52?
I really enjoyed it. I followed it for some reason. I decided to follow it as it came out, so I was there every week buying these at the comic shop, and have distinct memories because it was right around the time that we moved to Texas. So I remember like getting set up at a new shop and picking these up, and I for something that didn't have the main like DC heroes in it because they were away. It was something I really appreciated, like getting to see some of these lower tier, for lack of a better term, characters, and kind of having that real time comic experience. Because with, as you know, with comic storytelling, the events of one day can be stretched out for us over like 6 months,
Oh
depending
yeah,
who's the author and what the point of the story is. Um, so it was a fun experiment, one that I tried to stick around with for Countdown and couldn't hang. And it never really, I don't think it ever really perfectly coalesced, um, like this series did, unless you want to get into like Superman and the Triangle era and how that eventually
sure.
became 52 books a year. But um, just the amount of creative talent behind it was something I really appreciated in going into these little nooks and crannies of the DC universe and the mysteries that we had spread throughout it. It's been a while since I've read it, and unfortunately, I actually just sold my copies of it a few months ago, just because, as much as I enjoy it, I'm like, am I ever gonna read this again? Because it's been a long time, and it's on DC Universe Infinite, so I can
True.
free up space for more Batman.
And 52 issues, I mean, it takes up a chunk of space in a long box too. That's something that
It
can
does.
can certainly attest to. Well, and there is an omnibus volume that they actually just reprinted. So if you wanted to go and reabsorb it that way, I think that's a great way to do it. But DCUI is also just solid, and if you want to just absorb the the key strokes of the story, then you can certainly do that there. Um, well, in 52 number 30, we briefly touched on what happened. I think it was in episode number 0 of this
Yeah.
show, and then we also touched on it in our 52 binge with Nick and Nico Caruso. But in 52 number 30, that's where Bruce Wayne seemingly banished his demons with the help of the Ten-Eyed Brothers. A connection to the Ten-Eyed Man of those brothers is kind of indeterminate at this point. But in 52, number 47, Bruce and Tim Drake have made their way to the fabled village of Nanda Parbat, where without the guidance and guarding of his personal demons, Bruce is going to confront what is called the Thogel ritual to spiritually cleanse himself of the corrosive darkness that remains. Of course, if you joined
Very
us for our
important.
Infinite Crisis binge, that corrosive darkness is a critical component of what led Batman down a path of despair and paranoia and isolation that he is now working his way out of. So Bruce is going to confront the Thogel ritual. After 7 days in complete isolation and darkness, he emerges from the ritual's chamber with a smile on his face and conceivably a whole new renewed purpose. And from there, we basically went to the events of Batman Face to Face, which we definitely discussed in episode number 0 of Nights Never Die. And that only really leaves us to talk about the subject of this episode, Batman number 655. Fascinating beginning to the entire run. It was released, of course, on July 26th, 2006, with a cover date of September. Of course, this issue was written by Grant Morrison, pencils and inks by the inimitable Andy Kubert, and colors by Dave Stewart. So, the solicitation for Batman number 655 that was sent out via the Previews magazine to all the comic shops in the country Comic legends Grant Morrison of All-Star Superman and Seven Soldiers and Andy Kubert of Ultimate X-Men and 1602 come together for part 1 of Batman and Son. After a harrowing battle with the Joker high atop police headquarters, Batman decides to let Bruce Wayne step into the light. But just who is watching billionaire Bruce Wayne? And what does their plan have to do with Man-Bat? Retailers, please note, this issue will feature 2 covers by Andy Kubert and Adam Kubert in approximately a 10-to-1 ratio. The Adam Kubert cover is right here. Another kind of fun side note from this, this was also around the same time that Action Comics number 844 was released, which was the first issue of Jeff Johns with Richard Donner on Action. So it was a whole new beginning for Batman and Superman. And Andy and Adam switched roles. So Andy's the main artist on Batman, and Adam provides a variant. On that series, Adam was the main artist, and Andy provided a variant for Action Comics number 844, which I thought was kind of fun.
Which of the 2 covers do you like the most?
That's a good question. Probably the main cover.
Yeah.
You know, there's just a classic quality to it, and I think Andy Kubert kind of gets overlooked a little bit when it comes to his ability to render a classic Batman. What about you?
No, for sure the Andy one. One, because I didn't really see a whole lot of the variant. I think you said it was like a 1 in 10, right? So
Yeah.
I never really saw it on the shelves, and I just prefer how the standard one pops. I like the Batman logo better. I think it being smaller and having that logo that we first got with Hush, that it just pops a little bit more. And then the red, coloring of the cave. And have a good night, Andrew. I just think it just looks better overall. It just becomes such an iconic cover to me because of where we go on this journey, starting right here.
Absolutely. Didn't stop me from getting both of them.
Nice.
And actually, these issues, you might notice there's a little scroll on the titles of both of them. That's because San Diego Comic-Con 2008, I had the good fortune of meeting Grant Morrison, much younger and darker-haired me.
Was that your Superboy Connor Kent cosplay?
It was just a shirt. It wasn't,
okay.
cosplay, but I mean, it kind of looks like cosplay, but it wasn't intended to be. But
dude, that's awesome.
Very gracious person to meet. I think he, at the time was in the middle of Final Crisis. This was in the summer of 2008. So a lot of fun conversation. The interesting thing so this photo was actually taken by someone cosplaying as Heath Ledger's Joker. And
weird.
It's not like a phone. It's like an actual digital camera that I had with me. And Morrison told the person taking the picture to turn it on its side so that it looked like we were looking at the cover of The Killing Joke when the picture was taken. So that was
oh my god, that's amazing.
That was pretty fun.
That's such a Morrison meta thing to think of.
Totally. Yeah. No, it was a blast. Well, so with 655, before we actually start breaking the issue down, Javi, what do you remember about the first time you actually read this?
I was excited for it. While Arkham Asylum at the time wasn't one of my favorites, I'm trying to remember. I don't know if I've read Gothic at this point yet. But I was a big fan of Morrison's run on JLA and how Batman was portrayed in that. So to me, this was a win. I was really looking forward to it, to see him bring that energy. And he had mentioned, I'd read some interview probably on like Newsarama or something about, merging that Batman and Bruce Wayne aspects more completely. And, it had been neglected, and how he wanted to bring back like the 70s love god Batman, Bruce Wayne, and bring more of that James Bond fantastical element that we saw in JLA to the title. But in the meantime, like honoring all this continuity and trying to make it feel like it all happened to one person. And it just seemed really intriguing to me. And I mean, after I've gone up and down with Batman in terms of collecting it, like if I didn't like the art, then I would switch to detective or maybe read JLA. And I've since gone back and filled up holes, but from like Hush on, I haven't missed an issue. So this was like right at the beginning of my consistency with reading the main title, instead of cherry picking for like the last 10, 15 years that I've been collecting at that point.
Sure.
So I was pretty excited.
Yeah, I was too. We had just cleared 1 year later.
Yeah.
Infinite Crisis was for me a really important event to my development as a monthly comic book reader, which I think I talked about on this show
Mhm.
before. And I was really excited about the idea of getting to a sense of adventure to be emphasized as opposed to just a sense of grittiness. Because as we talked about in a previous episode, you know, Batman had been through the ringer as a character and had gone through so many dark and depressing events, and you know, was the perpetrator of some questionable tactics himself. So the idea of getting on the other side of that darkness that we saw portrayed in Infinite Crisis to something potentially more adventurous was the thing I was most excited about. Thing I remember the most about reading it for the first time was that the word swashbuckling came to mind. There were like,
Yeah.
if you go from a relatively recent Batman issue like 650, the final issue of Under the Hood, to 655, there is a rather dramatic tonal shift that feels very much in line with something that's more adventurous, but it also doesn't feel like it is getting away from the core of what makes Bruce Wayne the guy that we all know and love, which we'll talk about a little bit, I'm sure, as the issue goes on in our conversation. But yeah, I just remember being very enamored with the spirit of the issue as it was presented, and it was a great way to sort of whet the appetite for the wider run. Granted, this tone I don't think is consistent beyond maybe the first arc even. By the
Mhm.
time we get to a certain issue called The Clown at Midnight, things take a pretty insane turn that I don't think it persists through the entirety of the run after that, but it's definitely a preview of the kinds of depths that the storytelling can go. But unlike just being an obstacle that piles onto Batman and changes his personality, it is something for him to overcome. And I think that's a critical difference maker. So
Yeah.
it'll be fun to talk about. Well, let's jump in. Let's crack this sucker open. So one of the very first things that we see is this beautiful splash page that's also quasi horrifying. And we get a little bit of a glimpse at the Joker's sort of maniacal attitude at this idea that maybe he just killed his arch enemy. It's kind of unclear, at least at this point, if the Joker knows that, if whether or not that is actually Batman. And of course, it's another glimpse at Andy Kubert's rather definitive proportions for these characters in particular. It's these pages absolutely made clear that Kubert is the right person for going for that more adventurous tone. And the
Well, even
conflict,
the first page from the very first panel, like his art has this great 3D effect to it. And
yes.
we're not staying within conventional boundaries. Like Gordon's glasses are breaking the frame. And as we see him like fall to earth, like you feel the motion of him moving through space as the ground's like rushing up to meet him. Um, and I haven't, to be honest, like the Kuberts, I appreciate their dad's place in comic history, especially pertaining to the Flash.
Sure.
Um, but I wasn't necessarily always a big fan of them, and I have the hardest time figuring out which one did what between Adam and Andy. And I remember that one of them did X-Men, like adjectiveless X-Men after Jim Lee left,
Mhm.
and one of them did Ultimate X-Men. It may have been the same one. My memory is really bad when it comes to them, but it just just completely won over by their style in this series, and
Yeah.
they become Adam's become or Andy's become one of my favorite Batman artists.
Absolutely, doing no small part to these first few issues,
Yeah,
especially,
yeah,
there's just I feel like Andy is a little bit more, proportional, maybe is the right word? That's not to take away from Adam, I think Adam is an
yeah,
incredible artist too, but he's more stylized, I think, than
yeah,
Andy. But at the same time, even though Andy is arguably less stylized than Adam is, you look at a page, you can tell it's Andy Kubert, you know? At least I think.
just this last panel you have on the screen, the dimension that he gives that image of Batman holding the gun and pointing
Yeah.
right at you, like it's a powerful panel.
Oh, most definitely. And you talked about the sense of dimension. The first panel on this page that sort of looks down to the bottom of the city as the Joker helicopter is coming up, and we see the potentially dead false Batman there with the Joker screaming in conceivably ecstasy over what he's just done. But there is a sense of elevation that
Mhm.
is a little dizzying if you look at it for too long or look at it up close. Um, I revisited this issue just in my omnibus here, and getting it in a deluxe size does it even more
Oh
favors.
yeah,
You know,
yeah.
it's a nice set of pages to read, and the coloring just pops with a vibrancy that is befitting of the tone, especially as we move later on. But of course, the Joker thinks that he has Batman on the ropes. This Batman pulls a gun, and I remember being very confused, just in these first couple of pages.
Yeah, same.
Uh, yeah, and then, we move to this.
Especially this next page.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that's on purpose. Um, I just remember being so discombobulated at first with Batman shooting the Joker, but the way that it goes, like looking at this splash right here, like you can clearly see Batman in the image, but you kind of lose the fact that that's the Batman we just been following in the prior pages is the one who had the gun and is shooting the Joker because he's obscured by the Joker.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until like subsequent read throughs where I started to understand what was going on. But like the way Morrison tells the story and just throws you into the middle of it, and it's this crazy situation of Gordon laughing on his way down as he's falling, and there's like these kids floating from a Joker helicopter. Like it's just complete insanity, but at the same time feels like very classic Batman with everything that's going on, all the elements that we see right here.
Yeah, I mean, the idea of getting thrown into the deep end is most potent here. This
Yeah.
feels like the ending point of another big story, like that, we've just gone on a whole journey of another Batman versus the Joker tale, and we've reached the climactic moments of that latest clash.
Mhm.
Uh, and to serve instead as the beginning of a longer narrative, especially considering, because I mean, at this point, it wasn't clear what the Joker's role would be in the wider run,
Oh,
right?
not even.
So, he's there's already an evolution that is being set up that it certainly doesn't pay off here. It will pay off later.
Yeah.
But going back to what you said about just what we both talked about, just the confusion. This page in particular, I remember just being like, "Oh, okay, so did he shoot him and then jump in the air?"
Yeah.
Or and I if you just linger on this page for long enough, you can figure out exactly what's going on, but I couldn't do that. I needed to turn the page to figure out what happens next. Like, there's such a sense
Oh,
of energy. It's and this action here at the beginning is so kinetic that I just blew through these first couple pages because I wanted to know what was gonna happen next.
yeah.
And, but it's always best, to slow down a little bit, because there's a lot of information just on this page too, even as just a splash. But then we go to this next page here, and
Page
another
6.
yeah, another interesting little bit of foreshadowing here that I mean, none of this, Zur-Anar did not register for me the first time I read this. Did it register for you at all?
I honestly don't remember. I want to say yes, but I honestly don't know. I remember rereading it and just noticing how it's all over the place throughout. Like, no, I think I did clock it initially.
Mm-hmm.
And like, oh, that's kind of interesting. But when you go back and reread it and you know what's going on behind it, that it's like, oh, okay. And then you notice it even more as we go through the whole story, not just this issue, but the next, 2-3 years of this. Well, no, I mean, up until today,
Yeah,
really, if you
really.
read Chip Zdarsky's run. So, yeah, it just, the playing card falling is like the Joker falls, and it's such a hard cut from that last page that you just showed to this one. And it's even funnier in hindsight now, because this is 2006,
Yeah,
and we see a very similar looking image in 2011 if you've played Batman Arkham City. That I wouldn't have made that comparison, you know, 2006, because it hadn't
sure.
happened yet. But
Yeah,
now I that's the first thing I think of is the Arkham games.
absolutely. If you are a fan of those games, which I think both of us certainly are, hello. I don't know how you could not see that. But at the same time, too, another thing that I think is fascinating about these opening moments in particular is that it comes across very much like a mission statement. Because
Mm-hmm.
you think about when this run started, this is just a little more than a year after Batman Begins hit theaters. We're still a couple years away from seeing The Dark Knight.
Mm-hmm.
And conceivably, a lot of new people potentially at least had their interest piqued in checking out more Batman stories because of that movie. I know several people who became regular comic book readers because of that movie. But the idea, the expectation is, let's get a Batman versus the Joker story in our Batman comic books, and let's check out what's going on with this rivalry. And really, right out of the gate, the creative team is saying, we're throwing the Joker in the garbage. Literally. We are
Yeah.
literally tossing. I don't think I included the page. Yeah, I didn't. But the next page, Batman literally throws the Joker into a dumpster, and the paramedics are begging him not to do it because he's still alive.
Yeah.
So, he's got this bullet hole, he's bleeding out of his face, and he's just making some gurgling noises, really. Um, but that's a mission statement right there, at
That
least to me.
that's why I love talking with Chris Clow people, because like you get all these things and they just come to you, and now I'm seeing it in a slightly different way, because as I'm looking at these pages and I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking to myself, I wonder if Chris had this DC Direct Action figure, because they did a Batman and Son wave of Batman, Joker, the Man Bat, ninjas, and little Damian.
Yeah.
And like, this Joker figure is still one of my all-time favorite Joker figures. Like, the face, the insanity that they capture in this sculpt, and this posture, and he's got the crowbar, and it's phenomenal, right? And I'm thinking now, like, this is it. This is the only time we see Joker in like his classic form in all of this Morrison run. In 6 years of stories, a lot of which have Joker in some fashion. This is the closest we get to that classic iteration of it. And as
Yeah.
you just pointed out, like, we are throwing that version in the trash and we're starting over. And it's just all right there in the page. And like, it's just, you just got to pluck that analysis out from it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I mean, obviously, as the issues progress over the course of this run, Morrison's not throwing the Joker away,
No, not
but
at all.
what's happening is the Joker is sort of having canonized psychological evolution. It's sort of some of the ideas that Morrison played with in Arkham Asylum, the
Mhm.
the, the graphic novel that they wrote with alongside Dave McKean, because that was a story that described the Joker as having super sanity. So he's just so far removed from what we normally associate with the processing of external stimuli that it manifests in a way that is very difficult for anybody to predict. And we do start to see that explored a little bit more as the run goes on, particularly once we get to the Clown at Midnight, which
Yeah.
we definitely need to have Paul on for, because I know he's going to hate reading it, but I think we're going to love talking
I
about
hate reading it. I swear, like, it's a good story,
Yeah.
right? And good art. But the last time I was doing a big read through of this, I'm like, you know what? I think this is the last time I need to read this story.
Well,
And now we're doing a podcast. So guess what? I'm
you
going to be
spoke
reading it
too
again.
soon.
Yeah. And it's not like it's bad and I hate it. It's just, it's so like, if you're like chugging along doing a binge of this series, like it halts the momentum dead in its tracks because it is very verbose and it takes time to get through it,
It
which
takes a lot longer than a traditional comic book to read. Yeah.
yes, which to that, critique, I would say at least you're getting your money's worth.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Most
From a
definitely.
time investment standpoint, you are getting your money's worth. If you're trying to hurry through and binge things, like it's going to be frustrating.
You break down the amount of time it takes to read by the cover price of $2.99, you definitely get more out of it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, so after Batman literally throws the Joker in the garbage, he checks in with Commissioner Gordon. Uh, I also really like just the way that this is framed. This is mostly a page of exposition,
Yeah.
but exposition has never looked this good, I
Oh
don't think.
no.
I mean, the blinds with the light just sort of playing off of Batman's mask, and the sort of kooky expressions on the face of Commissioner Gordon as he's trying to sort of work through the Joker toxin that's still in his system. Uh, but also too, it's just like it's a good establishment of the idea that bigger things await. This is not going to
Mhm.
be your run of the mill Batman running around Gotham City trying to snatch the Penguin out of the Iceberg Lounge again. This is going to be something different by necessity.
And especially in like this first um cycle, if you want to call it that. It's very the Batman Gordon friendship is very much at the forefront of their partnership because you lose it a little. Well, obviously you lose it for a little bit in the middle because Bruce is quote unquote dead, and then we kind of get back to it a little bit in Incorporated, but it's at its strongest here in these initial story arcs. And there's a page before this where there's a nurse talking with Gordon, and she says, "See, I just don't find live beheadings all that funny, Commissioner." And I'm reading it and just you have to question everything that's in these early stories. It's like, is he setting up something that we're going to get at the end? And maybe there might be another beheading somewhere in the middle. But
Maybe.
it's like, is that groundwork or is that just a line? Like, you always have to wonder with Morrison.
Yeah. Yeah. It's one of the fun things of reading the work, I think. There was
Yeah.
a lot of setup that is paid off in something like JLA, for instance, and I've only actually just scratched the surface of the Green Lantern, but I'm enjoying that too. But not as much as I enjoy this, but it's a fun book to go on a ride for. Uh, and then after that, so we get to see some quiet time of what Batman does in his spare time. Of course, he's still asleep from the night before at 3 p.m. And then a couple of hours later, so I looked at the weight that he's pushing there. He's
Oh my god.
benching effectively 1,000 pounds. So in ideal conditions, like he's got like he's got the pecs for it. I don't know anybody that can bench 1,000 pounds,
Yeah.
but Bruce
Well,
Wayne.
he's got some heavy lifting to do in, 20 issues or so. So
True enough.
that's where it comes from. I mean, what's the point of doing all that benching if you can't lift something up that, yeah, try not to say what he's going to be doing later.
What's the point of all those
Yeah.
push-ups if you can't even lift a bloody log, right? Yeah.
Actually, I
Yeah.
had a quick question for you before we move on to
Sure.
the day-to-day minutia. There's a Gotham Gazette headline in the hospital scene that reads, "Death toll rises to 350 in French airline disaster."
That's right.
And I'm trying to remember what that's alluding to, because I feel like it comes into place, and then what I thought it was, it wasn't, unless it's something later. So that may be a pin to come revisit as we go on.
Yeah, please do that because I honestly did not make a connection. So,
I feel like it's a connection, but I don't know if I'm just imagining it, or it seems very specific. And it's like, why
sure.
would he waste such a big headline?
Yeah, true.
But
Well, we'll find out.
yeah, but I do appreciate seeing Batman stay here. This isn't the only time we're going to see Batman bench press in the Morrison run,
No, it's not.
and it's hard to not look at Bruce Wayne sitting at a table, a very long table, and not think of Batman 89.
Oh yeah.
But
Yeah.
but also his posture like this, like it's kind of brooding, but it also reminds me of the first appearance of the Joker in Batman
Sure.
#1, where we see him in the chair.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I hadn't made that connection, but I can absolutely see that. I mean, there are a lot of allusions to the idea that there is a sense
Two
of
sides.
commonality between the two of them.
Yeah,
Um, I'm not sure if that's necessarily being literalized here, but how could you not draw that comparison, you know? I mean,
yeah.
it's a pretty fun thing to do. And then of course, he's doing some tinkering on the suit because how could he not? Then he goes into the cave. He confides in Alfred the idea that Gordon says I need to get out more. He says Gotham is my comfort zone. So Alfred introduces the idea of this gala event that's taking place in London. It's a philanthropic event to benefit people in Africa, and he says, "Okay, yeah, sure, let's go." It's kind of a rather cavalier attitude that I don't think we had seen from him in a while. But again,
Mhm.
we're on the other side of a greater sense of darkness that he has overcome. And then in the cave, we get to check in with Mr. Tim Drake. And the title of this issue, of course, is "Building a Better Batmobile," and we find out, yeah, that's literally happening. Bruce is in the middle of constructing the latest version, the latest mark of the Batmobile. But there's
There was
also oh, yeah, please.
something I wanted to ask you about in the Batcave scene, before Tim comes in,
Mhm.
and Alfred points out that the growl in Batman's voice that he used to have to practice before he would
Right.
go out at night, that he's doing it all the time now. Um, and for me, like, thinking of like Batman the animated series, in the early episodes, there's a very clear distinction to how Batman spoke versus the smoothness that Conroy's Bruce Wayne had, especially when he was in Playboy mode. And then as the series progressed, and certainly by the time it went to the different network and we got the new Batman Adventures and Batman Beyond,
He didn't make that distinction.
the distinction is gone. And
Yeah.
it's not just because like Conroy or Bruce was older in Batman Beyond. It didn't have the dual identities. Like, just that gravel in his voice pretty much stayed there. It's certainly there in the Arkham games. And even when he's revisited the character after those shows, like with Justice League and Justice League Unlimited and the Arkham games, like that that gravel that never went away, that growl never fully went back to that smooth talking Bruce Wayne that we used to see. And
Yeah.
I found it interesting that, Alfred pointed it out that he's doing it all the time now.
Yeah. It's just kind of a an involuntary switch up. And or it's also possible, and the idea that I always kind of went with in my head for Batman Beyond in particular was that he spent so much time pushing into his vocal cords that they
Mhm.
were just kind of shot by the time he was an old man, so naturally he's just going to sound that way. He sounds like a smoker by the end of his
Right.
life.
Yeah.
And even though it's kind of Batman's thing that he would never do something like that. So yeah, I
And
thought it was a fun thing to bring up, definitely.
and speaking of things that Batman would never do, usually, um, so there's a story going around Gotham now, which has gotten a lot more silent, but the story is that the Batman shot the Joker, which is adding to the criminal's fear. Do you feel that Batman utilizing that myth contradicts any of his mission? Because as far as he's concerned, like he didn't kill the Joker. He's not the one who shot him.
Mhm.
But does that compromise any good that he's trying to do as Batman to like the normal citizens of Gotham? Does he want them to fear him too? Because it's like, oh, well, if Batman shot the Joker, who's to say he's not going to turn on me next?
I don't think that it runs afoul of what he's trying to do, especially considering that at this point, he is really attempting to rebuild some of the, I guess, reputation that both Batman and Bruce Wayne had had,
Mhm.
at least up through something like War Games, or Bruce Wayne Murderer, maybe. Um, I think there is a big distinction between taking advantage of the fear that bad people will have for him
Mhm.
and the real moral consequence of actually participating in that behavior, because he doesn't actually do it, but he sees some kind of a tactical advantage in a rumor that he might have descended into such behavior. That feels like Batman to me.
Yeah.
Do you feel differently?
No, not at all. I just thought I was just curious what your take on it would be. I mean, it's no different than, or if you think of like the '89 movie where,
Right.
he gets shot and then he gets back up again and people think that he's immortal and that he can't be killed. Like it's just like it's one of those tools in the tool belt, like you said. And as
Yeah.
long as it's not true, that keeps him on the side of the angels with his friends who, therefore don't have to go out and hunt him for crossing the line.
Yeah.
So,
Exactly. And the people who need to know uh, about the kinds of things that he's willing to do, they do know.
yeah.
So, if a beat cop tries to get Batman for murdering the Joker, it's probably not as consequential as Gordon knowing for a fact that
Yeah.
he wouldn't do that. But the cops would probably know that it was one of their own that actually tried to kill the Joker. So we'll explore that too
Yeah.
later on. In a pretty uh, interesting portion of this first part of the run here. So we move to this moment here where Francine Langstrom is apparently being threatened by Talia al Ghul. Now, this is a really important page for a couple of different reasons. One of which is that, and I think also at this point, it was really, if not difficult, virtually impossible to predict the role that Talia would end up playing, especially by the time we got to the near the finish line of this entire run. But there's a little boy on this page. This constitutes the first cameo appearance of someone who's going to be very important to this run throughout the entirety of its publication. Um, yeah, what do you got about this one, Javi?
Well, I I don't I don't think there's too much of a mystery to who the mystery lady is, and in fact, it doesn't last more than this issue. But I appreciate the staging that the art does. in trying to build up to a reveal later on. There's some stuff with that little mystery character towards the end that I'll mention when we get there that felt a little weird to me.
Sure.
But overall, like, again, just Kubert's art on this is just masterful.
Yeah. Yeah, most definitely. Well, after this, we actually see Bruce and Alfred arrive in London, and as they're checking into their rather palatial-looking hotel just underneath Big Ben, maybe? Or maybe that's just a wider establishing shot that doesn't have anything to do with where they're actually at in the city. But Bruce, out of the corner of his eye, catches Kirk Langstrom just tearing out of this hotel and tries to stop him and see how things are going. He must be here for the gala too. But of course, Batman absolutely understands that Langstrom seems to be very distressed. And yeah,
Was Langstrom ever philanthropic in the
I don't
comics
know if that
prior to
was
this?
firmly established before this, but it's a convenient cover. Like, it's
Yeah.
conceivable, I guess, that he might travel in some of those circles, but I
Or
don't
was it
remember
Bruce
prior.
just kind of adding to the, the Playboy mystique? Because they're both in this scene, they're both playing roles. They're both
Sure.
offering up these facades that hide what's really going on beneath the surface.
Yeah.
Bruce is trying to get back into the Playboy swing of things, and obviously Langstrom is just terrified. And I like his just his Edwardian cloak that he's got on. Like,
Yeah.
it feels like of another era, and like we should be in London with the fog
Right.
and I don't know, it's cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. And then Bruce and Alfred, of course, duck into the elevator, and Alfred's saying, "Well, there's got to be a reasonable explanation. This has to be a coincidence." And Bruce just says, "There goes my vacation." He knows
Yeah.
something's going on and that he's probably going to be needed in a different capacity very soon. And of course, we're reading the ongoing Batman comic book series. Of course, he is. That's
Yeah.
what makes it fun.
Just
So,
that pushing, like, Kubert's art is so cinematic throughout this whole run. Uh, and I just love how we get closer and closer and then cut to the end. It's just
yeah.
his framing is just perfect.
Yeah, definitely. And of course, we see Langstrom get into a car. He's frantically asking about the condition of his wife and is not given a very satisfying response from the people that he is driving with. But then we go into another little fun part. The whole undercurrent of training or retraining to be Bruce Wayne again is front and center in this spread here. Alfred is trying to voice coach him in addition to just changing his overall demeanor. He's always a man on the defensive. He needs to be inviting. Bruce Wayne's reputation needs fuel. We need to get in the TMZs of the time and make people believe in the billionaire playboy once again. I was very charmed by this scene. What did you think, Javi?
Oh no, I loved it. And it just Alfred is so good in this series. There's a moment earlier in the cave too where I can't tell if Alfred's joking or not because of like that whole stiff British dry sense of humor where he's talking about feeding the bats and how they prefer free range corn fed chicken goujons gently fried in extra virgin olive oil. And like and Batman just kind of it seems like he's so focused that he doesn't realize that Alfred feeds the bats. And it's like this is like his safe space. So I guess he's not as observant because he doesn't have to be quite as, on edge,
Sure.
because he's in his cave. And then that bleeds into like the whole voice thing. Again, it bleeds into this scene where, it gets brought up about you've got to chill out with the voice and your posture is someone who's on the defensive and just it's great too because Morrison like lays that groundwork for everything counting, right? Because he
Yeah.
mentions all the past romances, like some of the big ones that Bruce has had, Julie Madison and Vicky Vale and Silver St. Cloud. And it's laying that groundwork for potentially another great love interest that we'll get to next time.
Yeah, absolutely. And the persona that is reestablished in terms of the Playboy Bruce Wayne, that building that's being done will contribute to a fascinating breaking down of that wall before
Mhm.
too long. Not to get too far ahead of things, but of course, there's also another telling page here. Bruce is making the rounds. He's charming all of the ladies who want to give him their number, and he's trying to find Alfred, who's got that darn cell phone so that he can get everybody's number. But all the while, he is being watched, and he's being watched by a very perceptive boy that we saw a little bit earlier. And Talia and this child make him right away. It doesn't matter everything that we've seen him do to rebuild the Bruce Wayne persona. These two see right through it, and I think that that's absolutely designed to be a statement about not just Talia's ability to teach and to point things out, but of the boys' perceptiveness, and that all culminates in this final page where Talia vows to say hello, and there's a lot of angry looking man bats right there waiting to
Ninja Man
to
Bats,
do her orders. Yeah, the ninja man bats. Man,
which
what a
is such an
way.
awesome idea.
Well, and kind
Yeah.
of going back to what I mentioned earlier about where Batman was in the wider culture, particularly after the release of Batman Begins, the Nolan films, and at this point, just the one Nolan film, but that one in particular leans very hard into a kind of realism that we had never seen with the character on film up to that point. And I just absolutely love the fact that the first issue of Grant Morrison's run on Batman ends with a page that you could only have in this medium, that is
Yeah.
only plausible in this particular format, to tell us a story with Batman that you certainly cannot get in a movie, or even really at this point, kind of in animation either. I mean, I can't remember seeing an army of ninja man bats that were just chomping at the bit to get to him. But I
Didn't
just
the
love the statement that this makes.
what was it called? Was it called Batman versus Rob? No. Son of
Oh
the
yeah, one of the
Batman?
later movies that
Didn't
started
didn't
adapting
the
this
new
material.
52 version do it?
I think so, yeah.
I think they had the Ninja Man Bats in it.
But
It's
that
been a
was
minute
still
since I
also like
watched it.
10 years away at this point
Yeah.
too. So I just appreciated the fact that we are getting a Batman comic book story that can only really be done in comics. So
There's it's more next issue, but we see like the groundwork at this gala of Bruce doing his schmoozing and Alfred is like checking out some of the art and above his head is a painting. It's just a question mark.
mhm.
And it's like it's the first glimpse of what we're going to see next issue and how beautifully the environment ties into the story. But it starts here. Um, and one of the things that I was just talking about, like that feels really weird to me now. Um, actually, in the comments talking about Damian Tyler, let me go to that first. I I got shades of Bane from Nightfall.
Hmm.
Um, not to say that Damian's Bane, but just the way that Bane observed, and he's like, "Oh, that's Batman," and we kind of see that again here. Um, but my issue with Damian in this, it's just it feels out of place given where we see him go. Particularly, just it's just the line of, "What are we going to do now, Mama?" Like, as far as I remember, this is the only time he calls Talia Mama. And it just feels really infantile for his characterization, especially when we get into what he does in like 2 issues from now. But I mean, when I think of Damian, he's always trying to be more adult, and he's always very proper. Um, and Talia is mother, Bruce is father, and this is like Morrison, I guess, just trying to figure out things, right? Just like we're trying to do on the show, like what's our format going to be? When are we going to hit the rhythm of how we normally do things? And Damian, on this read through, Damian calling her mama just really stood out to me. Was kind of jarring because like that's not how he talks. And who would know better than how he talks than his creator?
I totally see where you're coming from. I guess I come at it from a slightly different perspective. On the one hand, yes, the characterization had not fully been developed yet in the mind of Grant Morrison. I think that's part of it. But another component that I think becomes much clearer later on is that I think that the intention was always for Damien to be a shockingly young child, not
Yeah.
necessarily like 5 or so, but not too far, like maybe 7, I think would probably be reasonable, especially considering the way that he's characterized and things that we learn later. And maybe it's not fair to bring this up at this point, but one of the things that defines Damien in my mind is that he is never permitted to act like a child.
Mhm.
It's really not until he's fully out of his mom's purview and even out of his father's purview
Yeah.
later in the run that he's given the opportunity to actually act his age. And
I would say not even until Williamson takes him into his own solo book and he, gets to read manga and kind of associate more with people his own age.
yeah, I certainly wouldn't presume to disagree with that, but I think it definitely does come through by the time we get to Batman and Robin
Yeah.
that being under the watchful eye of someone uh, who did get to have a childhood, even if it was a strange, unusual, and somewhat harsh one, considering his contemporaries. Dick Grayson never lost sight of what it meant and the importance of what it meant to be a kid.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that comes through. Obviously, that's part of the benefit and detriment of reading these issues now is that we have such a great idea and conception of what comes later on. But here in this moment, I'm more inclined to go with your hypothesis about, well, he's just not fully developed yet. So, but I totally see it. But
Yeah.
that's Batman 655. That's the whole kit and caboodle. That's the way things started off for Grant Morrison's ongoing run on Batman. Critical reception of the time seemed generally positive, although I did pull a review from Comic Book Resources that was published, I think the day the issue came out, and the reviewer, let's see, did it have? Yeah, Brian Cronin was the author's name, said that this is interesting because it sort of glosses over the time in the mid 90s when Chuck Dixon and Doug Moench, especially Moench, frequently wrote about Bruce Wayne. That is neither here nor there, as for the most part, it really has been about a decade since we've seen Bruce Wayne take a central role in the comic, and I'm glad to see Morrison address it and address it with panache. Although, later in that same review, kind of throws shade on Andy Kubert's artwork. Says
Really?
Andy Kubert's art was well dot dot dot. It wasn't awful or anything. I don't think it helped the book any, but at the same time, I do not think it distracted from Morrison's story much, so I will have to give Kubert that much credit. He allowed Morrison's story to be told without being covered up. That's the best I can hope for, I think, and he did so. Not totally sure what he's trying to say, but
I
anything
think
that,
I'm trying to say it sucks.
well, he's
But
wrong.
I
Yeah.
mean, art is in the eye of the beholder, but I
True.
don't I
Very
don't
true.
see how you can make that assumption with this.
Just look at this.
Yeah.
Come on. Look, I'm biased. I know it, but
I Yeah, hey, I, not every artist works for everybody. There are definitely
True
some
enough.
artists that I look at their stuff and I just my brain does not comprehend it.
Yeah, yeah.
But
I
this
think
is not one of. I can't imagine this story or the beginning of this run without Kubert's art. And we
that's
go through a lot of um, artists in these 6 years. Um, but he lays the groundwork for me, and
oh yeah.
I can't picture one of the later artists doing this arc in the same way. But hey, there we go.
All right.
Everyone's got
Well,
different opinions, and that's
true enough.
cool.
True enough.
It 100% worked for me though.
Yeah,
I
same
really
here.
love it.
No, I agree with you. I mean, I think it set the tone. It set the tone for what the intent of the run was going to be. And yeah, I think it's just beautiful. I think it's beautiful work. Uh okay. Fair enough.
Him is it him or his brother where sometimes like faces just get kind of lacking in definition. Like sometimes there's a little bit of a cheat where it's just like two black eyes and a line for a mouth. I don't remember which keyword it is, but
I
it
associate
happens
that
on occasion.
more with Adam in my head, but I mean, I can see it.
Okay.
I can see it. Like, so, and then old friend of ours, Bill Ramey over at Batman on Film, his review in 2006 says the first part of the Batman and Son storyline was both exciting and a bit funny at times as well. The entire subplot of Bruce having to learn to be Bruce all over again is quite clever. Kubert's art, which sort of has a Jim Lee Hush feel to it, suits the story well. Overall, the story is well written and fun to read. From Bruce to Alfred to Tim and all aspects of the story combined, it simply says Batman. Not a perspective Bill will maintain over the course of this run, but
No.
it's fun to see. It's fun to see
Yeah.
the contemporary account. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's we all go through phases in our fandoms too. Um, on a recent podcast, like he mentioned, like there was a time where you kind of disavowed Adam West,
Sure.
you know,
Yeah.
and I know I've certainly been guilty of that. I've been guilty of loving Batman Forever and then shying away from it. And I've kind of come full circle to like appreciating it for what it is because I've seen other iterations of Batman that are more to my sensibilities. So
Sure.
now having other options makes it easier to take these divergences. And yeah, so I mean, it's all Batman.
It is. True enough.
Yeah.
And it's going to get a lot more Batman as time goes on.
Yes.
So that's pretty much going to do it for the first episode here of Knights Never Die, breaking down Batman number 655. Thank you for checking this episode out. Javi, where can people find you?
All over the place. I am writing reviews for 007 for King and Country, which is a comic series by Philip Kennedy Johnson. Doing reviews on that at thejamesbonddossier.com. Of course, I have my own YouTube channel, Up to Speed with Wally West, where I am starting to issue one of his series from the 80s, and theoretically, I'll be going till the present day. It's going to take me some time based on the speed I'm going. I've got episode 3 that I just need to put a little edit on, and it'll be posted hopefully within the week, work time permitting. And of course, the comic binge I've been popping up on a lot. But I was going to say batmanonfilm.com, where what am I not reviewing? It feels like just wrapped up Batman: The Adventures Continue. That was a great series with Paul Dini and Alan Burnett continuing the story from Batman the Animated Series, with the final arc kind of similar to this one, where crime's been cleaned up in Gotham, and like, what's Batman going to do next? I don't know. Batman Gargoyle of Gotham is also a book I recently reviewed, which if you haven't read the review or the book, go get it. It's amazing. I'm loving a lot of this Black Label stuff, including the very interesting City of Monsters that just came out. I think it just came out. Catwoman, that should be posted as of this recording tomorrow. It's the penultimate main chapter of the what war are we in, Chris?
Was it the Bat Cat? Well, I can't remember.
Gotham War.
I think yeah, there's another war going on.
It's the current war in Gotham right now.
Because we don't have enough of those going on in the world right now, right?
Yeah. So all those reviews, and I should be scheduling permitting recording an episode of Batman animation this week with the old gunslinger himself, talking about a Brave and the Bold episode that has some ties to this show.
Excellent.
So yeah,
well, that'll be a blast. No, thank you for the update, of course. As for me, follow me on Twitter, Threads, Instagram, etc., whatever your platform of choice is, at Chris Clow, CHRISCLOW. Be sure to check out Discovery Debrief, a Star Trek podcast, if you are a fan of The Final Frontier and haven't before. And be sure to keep it tuned right here to the Comic Binge for all the great discussions and comics that Paul Herman and I, mostly him, have cooking up for you. And of course, the best way to stay in touch with everything that the Comic Binge has going on, everything that Knights Never Die is going to be doing, is by subscribing to this channel. Like, subscribe, comment, try to help us out and spread the word about this show as long as you enjoyed it. Well, it's funny that you mentioned that. Right now, it's October 16th. In a few days, there's something brewing that we might have to touch on in the Comic Binge that also touches on consoles. So stay tuned for that. And of course, keep your eyes peeled for the next episode of Knights Never Die, because next time with Batman number 656, don't you just hate it when your party is ruined by a bunch of ninja man-bats? So be sure to join us then. We will, stay afloat on our socials for the date for the next issue or episode of Knights Never Die. But until then, remember, Batman and Robin will never die. And of course, it wouldn't be the Comic Binge without a reminder: read more comics.
Surinar.
Thank you very much.